there are very few people who make a living just speaking. Even the big names, Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, they're not just getting paid to speak and that's it. They have businesses that are supported by public speaking and also support their public speaking. I did a survey of 360 event managers, big events, little events, and half of them have zero budget for speakers. 42% only pay some speakers. 8% of event managers pay all or most of their speakers. And there's very little correlation between who pays and who you would think pays. What you want to do is you want to understand the business model of the events that you're speaking at. You want to see what other people are doing, and you don't want to end up on stage with a sales pitch. You want to end up on stage with a useful, helpful, educational presentation that makes people want to do business with you.
If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer Podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now, let's get to it with today's guest. Welcome, Digital Trailblazers. I am very excited to have with us today Bobbie Carlton. She is the founder of Innovation Women. She has helped people she's helped well over 5,000 speaking engagements get booked by folks. She is an expert in the speaking world. And when there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of excitement about speaking these days, there's also a lot of hype and maybe some overhype and some stuff that happens out there. And so she's a tell it like it is kind of person. She's going to cut through the guru hoopla that's out there for us today and really get down to what does it take to get on stage, how to do this well, and to leverage this in your business. So welcome, Bobbie. We're super excited to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell the audience, give them a little background on what you do and how you help folks in the speaking realm.
Absolutely. So Innovation Women is a platform. It's not a traditional speakers bureau. The idea is to directly connect event managers and speakers. And when I say event managers, it's anybody who is looking for a subject matter expert or a speaker or a trainer or an MC, anybody who really needs that person on stage. It can be a podcaster looking for a guest. It can be a journalist looking for a subject matter expert, colleges and universities, corporations, and of course, the big conferences and the small local events.
So how did this get started? Because that's a pretty interesting business model.
Absolutely. And I come from kind of years of experience in the kind of the online speaking or the speaking world, but also the whole online aspect of this. My background is heading up global PR at a bunch of big enterprise software companies. I was the person who got executives on stage for many years. And I will say that the first 20 years of my career, I never had a female client. So I have a little making up to the other women in the world for that one. But what I see is I would go to these conferences and events, and there would be very few women on stage. And I know the impact that speaking can have on your business and on your career. So that's kind of where the idea behind Innovation Women where it came from. I was coming from a tech background, a startup background, and I said, okay, I'm going to focus on technical and entrepreneurial women. But quite frankly, today we have 190 industries and we cover more than 7,000 different topics.
So what's real, what's not real in the speaking world? Because just for some context, our audience, a lot of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, people doing coaching courses, a lot of people in the online digital space. And so many of them, I hear it every day. I want to do speaking. Like I'm going to get the course going. I'm going to get the coaching going. But my real dream, because I always ask them what the bigger vision is that they have. The real dream, 70% of them say speaking on stage.
And the reason I kind of scream at that is speaking is a path to success in all of these different things. Like when you speak, people see you as a credible expert. So they are more inclined to hire you for your consulting services or coaching services or whatever services. They are more inclined to buy a product from you. You're credible. So speaking is a path to business and career success. And of course, there's the whole, chicken and egg thing, which comes first, because you also have to be credible to get on stage. You can't just vault up on stage and say, ta-da, I am a keynote speaker now. No, you have to have some kind of a foundation for your speaking. And that foundation can be a book. It could be articles. It could be your life, your business success. Like any of these things can be a foundation for a successful speaking career. But there are very few people who make a living just speaking. Even the big names, Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, they're not just getting paid to speak and that's it. They have businesses that are supported by public speaking and also support their public speaking.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that it's a pathway versus a destination.
Yes, absolutely. And the stage is a great destination. There's all kinds of fantastic benefits that come from being a successful public speaker. But a lot of people, when they think about public speaking, they talk about professional public speaking. I get paid to be on stage, because who wouldn't want to be paid tens of thousands of dollars for an hour of their time, right? That's the vision, I think, for a lot of people. And unfortunately, that's the promise that a lot of organizations are offering. Work with us and you'll make millions as a speaker. It's not that easy. You're building a whole business to support a speaking career like that. And it doesn't happen overnight. And there is no magic. There is no silver bullet.
I think that's important to understand is that, you can definitely make millions, and speaking can be part of the system and process and the way that you reach people and getting people into your world to make millions. But the millions from the speaking directly seems kind of far-fetched.
Yeah. And when I started Innovation Women in 2014 and 2015, so I've been doing this particular business a while, I did a survey of 360 event managers, big events, little events, and half of them have zero budget for speakers.
Wow.
Fully half. 42% only pay some speakers. They're paying the keynotes. Maybe they're paying the people who do workshops. They're paying folks that they have to have at this event who aren't going to show up any other way, discretionary funds. But they're not paying everybody. And if you're doing the math, 8% of event managers pay all or most of their speakers. And there's very little correlation between who pays and who you would think pays. Like big, massive, well-run organizations, CES, okay, the Consumer Electronics Show, they pay nobody. South by Southwest, massive multi-week event, right? World famous, pays no one. Teeny tiny organizations who consider it part of their mission often pay every single speaker. There's a local event here in the Boston area that I've spoken at a number of years. I'm not going to give out their name because I don't want them to be besieged, but their annual conference would run on the Cape every summer. They paid every speaker. They put you up for a long weekend on the Cape, fed you, took wonderful care of you, and you also had the opportunity to do consulting work on stage for which you were also paid. And they're an organization probably you've never heard of. So, there's a lot out there. I think a lot of people think I'm going to do speaking and get paid by the organizers. The reality is there are probably just as many different speaker business models as there are speakers.
I feel like it's real easy to look at somebody like Tony Robbins or somebody else that speaks on stage and make a lot of assumptions about how they're making their money. And that's not just true in the speaking world. That's true in just business in general, because I know that early on, like we got our start by trying to build a network marketing business and trying to build that online. And we would look at leaders in the network marketing industry that were very visible online. I'm not going to name names, but it's very easy to look at, for us, it was very easy to look at those people and assume that, oh, they're making millions with network marketing. Well, yes, they're making millions, but a tiny fraction of that was with network marketing. And the overwhelming majority of that money was made by selling courses and coaching programs and things like that. And it took us a long time to figure that part out. Like we were making six figures and, hustling it out, wondering why we're not making seven figures like these other people. And it's because we didn't have the back end. But the thing is, we never asked either. It's like, okay, what's going on in your business? How are you building? We just kind of looked at the surface level and assumed. So yeah, I think that's a really easy assumption to make because, we've had other guests on this podcast that talk about how to make money from stage and how to get that career going. And so they have their perspective. So with your experience, like if someone were brand new, like they've never been on stage before, they've never spoken before, what are some of the things that they would need to do to get started down here?
I think for most people who are interested in speaking, there's a tendency to throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall. Okay. They'll see an event or an opportunity and they'll go, yeah, I can do that. I can talk on this topic or that topic or that topic. And all of a sudden they're creating presentations and creating content and maybe creating classes and such for a whole bunch of different topics. When I start working with people and I start coaching them and supporting them, one of the things that I really like to do is say to them, okay, let's look at big ideas. Let's look at what is your umbrella concept. What is it that you know or that you can share that's a little bit different than other people? Like you have to have something that is uniquely your own. You also need to not boil the ocean. Like you don't have to tell everybody everything about your topic. You also need to think through, like, what is it you're going to offer people that they need? Like, what is the problem that you solve for that audience? I always tell people it's like solving a pain. People walk away with, oh my goodness, that is an amazing speaker. It really isn't as much about the performance on stage in that respect as it is what you are able to help people with. Speaking is an act of service. And if you can service that audience in a way that allows them to walk away with something that they can use, everybody wins. So there's figuring out what you're going to talk about, figuring out how you can deliver that piece of service. That's kind of the first step. And I think a lot of people kind of just vault over that and they go, I know all these things. Here I am, without really kind of sitting down and thinking about what they can offer that people actually need.
So figuring out what they can offer that people actually need. How do you go about, well, let's start with getting the gigs first, and then we can dive into actually how to, what to do, how to actually speak on stage.
Absolutely. And, I always tell people that Innovation Women is there as a speaking platform. Part of what we offer is a database of opportunities. But I'm also not unhappy basically saying, hey, you can do this yourself. It's really easy. Often start with the events and conferences that you know. Do you belong to organizations? Do you go to events and conferences all the time? Do you know an event organizer? Your best bet for speaking in terms of getting started is the event that you already go to. You don't need to search out all these different events and travel halfway around the world. What's in your own backyard? What's the organization you already know? You can usually ask, who is the person in our organization who books the speakers? You're probably very well positioned to be a part of the folks on stage if you're already a regular folk in the audience. So that's usually a great place to start. Another really good place to start is just by asking a question. All right. Now, picture this. You have gone to a conference or an event. There is a speaker on stage. They finish up their presentation and they ask for questions from the audience. Sometimes there are crickets and something dies inside for the speaker, because when they get crickets in that situation, it's like nobody cares enough to ask me a question. So what you're going to do as a wannabe speaker is you're going to be the person that stands up, raises your hand, introduces yourself, maybe says the name of your company, and asks an intelligent, thought out, but not self-serving question. All right. We all have heard the self-serving question. We know what they sound like. The speaker is happy. They get to answer your question. And oh yeah, you just became a public speaker. You literally just spoke to the same audience that the people on stage spoke to. You didn't have to go through an application or a pitch or sell yourself or anything else. You were able to talk to that same audience. So that is probably one of the easiest ways to get your foot in the door, because afterwards you can go up to the event organizers, probably somebody at the back of the room with a clipboard, and say, hey, I just asked a question because this wasn't being covered in the presentation, and would you be interested in a longer presentation on that? Maybe I can contact you or write out something and send it to you. So easy.
I like that. I never would have thought to do that.
I've been hanging around a while.
Yes. You've been at this for a little bit. Interesting. Okay. So, all right. Great tips on how to actually get your foot in the door. Is there anything on the pitch of a talk? When you start those conversations, what's a right or a wrong way to offer yourself as a speaker, if you will?
And I think one of the things that Innovation Women does well is kind of guiding people through the process. You're filling in an online form and we're asking you questions to help you figure this stuff out. One of the things that our profiles include is what we call an example talk. And an example talk is an abstract. It's a title. It's the description of the talk, and it's takeaways. So takeaways are what an audience will take away or walk out the door knowing or knowing what to do with after they've seen your presentation. So that little abstract is kind of everything when you're pitching, when you're applying, and when you are basically being a speaker. If you can boil down what it is you want to communicate into only a few sentences, you're usually well positioned to kind of take that next step. People who have to write out big, long things, you are not yet ready. Okay. I want to hear all about your presentation in just a few sentences. I want to hear what it is I will get out of it. It is not what you get out of it as a speaker. It's what the audience can take away.
I think that's a common pitfall, whether you're writing content, you're putting to get a job application or a cover letters, and just kind of word vomiting too much.
Yeah.
And you have to realize that these people are probably getting a bunch of applications and they're spending seconds per application, and they need to look at it and go, worth further exploration or no?
Yeah. And if you are pitching to corporations, if you are looking for that kind of speaking gig, you need to get through a set of gatekeepers. And those set of gatekeepers may have different needs and intentions than your final audience. So an example might be if you're a speaker who talks about burnout. If you're pitching corporate gigs, you're probably pitching a boss, a leader, an HR person. What are they concerned about? They're concerned about things like employee retention. How much does it cost to replace an employee because they burned out and left? What does burnout prevention do for my productivity as a company? So those are the types of things that you want to kind of merge into your speaking abstract, while keeping in mind that, your end audience really doesn't care about the corporate bottom line. They are caring about their personal stuff. So you need to get through the gatekeeper to get to your end audience.
I think you brought up a lot of really good points in there, and a lot of things that we actually talk about. Not just, there's so much overlap between what you're doing and marketing and sales and things like that. One of the things that we always talk about, one of the first rules you got to keep in mind is what we call an acronym WIFM, what's in it for me. That's the number one thing that you got to keep in mind, that your audience is thinking that you have to communicate to them. What's in it for me? They don't care about you. They don't care about your credentials. They care about what's the problem that you can solve for them, and what is it going to mean for them. And if you can't communicate that within the first couple seconds of your content or whatever you're doing, then they're out of there, right? You've got so little time to be able to communicate that before they lose interest and they move on. So yeah, focusing on your audience and the problem that you solve for them, and then also being able to boil down the takeaways and what they should be able to get out of that into just a few sentences. It brings to my mind, and I forget who says, it might have been, I forget who originally said this, but any idiot can make something sound complicated, but it takes a genius to make something sound simple. And that's really what we need to do, because if you've got a word vomit to get your point across, that's a good indication that you don't have your thoughts organized. Like you said, you need to be able to organize your thoughts and be able to simplify it down in a way that makes sense for people that they can get just like that, right? Without having to listen to 10, 15 minutes of you explaining it to them.
Yeah. And your audience is not going to remember every word you say, right? I've seen some studies that say by the time the audience reaches the doorway to leave the room, they have forgotten half of what you said. And a week later, they have probably forgotten 90% of what you said. What sticks with them? Usually it's short, punchy phrases. I usually call them like your refrain or your chorus, the thing you keep going back to in your presentation. They also remember stories. And storytelling and stories is, if you ask me, kind of a fraught area for a lot of people who do public speaking. We keep getting pushed this whole idea of stories and storytelling. And people don't understand the role of storytelling in speaking. They often conflate the two ideas and they say, I must be on stage and tell these elaborate stories. No, I talk to event managers all the time, and the feedback that I often hear is they tell these long stories that are completely irrelevant to the topic at hand. They tell complex stories and I have no idea where they're going with this because it literally does not impact the user. It's too personal, it's irrelevant, and often way too long. So if you are thinking about public speaking, understanding the role of your story inside that presentation is incredibly important. Make sure it's relevant and make sure it's not too long. And in terms of like keeping the audience's attention, one thing that's really good is make sure you give it some kind of a little twist, right? You don't want to tell a story where the audience is thinking, I know where this is going. Mm. Because the minute you get into that, everybody's gone. Like it's time to look at my email, right? You lost them. As soon as they could say, I know where this is going, they're gone.
So do you have a specific duration or way to figure out how long the story part of the talk should be?
I think it depends. I mean, there isn't any particular one note answer for any of this stuff. You can say, I don't ever want to see a story that's 15 minutes and 20 seconds long, and then along comes a speaker who nails it in 15 minutes and 20 seconds. So, everybody's different. If you tell a story that is too long and it doesn't work for your audience, you're gonna know. Like, you see them. They start to pick up their cell phones. They look elsewhere. They don't ask questions. So a lot of times, people who are interested in speaking, they're like, I'm a good speaker. I could just get right up there and do it. No, speaking takes practice. Speaking takes audiences reacting or not reacting to what it is you're doing. So a lot of times you'll see really excellent speakers who have absolutely honed their craft over years and years and dozens of speeches and presentations. They know what works. They know when to pause. They know exactly what they're doing because they've done it before.
So obviously there's quite a formula to really flesh out and to get good at and to practice. Do you advise folks kind of start at the local level or start at some smaller venues and just get their reps in before taking the big stage? Or
yeah, absolutely. And if you are at all nervous about public speaking, and lots of folks are, number one, everybody gets nervous, not just you. And number two, practice. Like, go and do presentations at local colleges, high schools, your kids' school, career day, whatever it is. Make sure that you have a really good presentation before you kind of step up on the big stage. And a lot of times that will be necessary before you get that opportunity. Speaking begets speaking. The more speaking you do, the more speaking you will do. And you want to knock it out of the park so that every time you get on stage, you are building a universe of people who have seen you speak, enjoyed what you are doing, learned from it, and are willing to refer you into new opportunities or perhaps get you hired into their company. So every presentation that you do should be creating new opportunities for you. And it's not going to happen if you are up on stage kind of figuring it out.
So you should be polished by the time you're on the big stage.
Yeah.
So that you can show how awesome you are and get those next gigs and everything else from there.
And you learn so much every time you do these. And, quite frankly, it isn't all about what happens on stage. It's often what happens on the trip to the stage, working with event managers, not being the PITA, the pain in the speaker. This is not the place to make demands. This is also not the place to not show up on time, not get your stuff in under deadline. Like, there's a lot of moving parts for an event manager. Somebody who is putting together a big show is not there to hold your hand. You are a professional and you should be capable of meeting a deadline, showing up on time, doing your job while they do theirs.
Now, speaking is a great way to help build your business. Like we talked about, the speaking is generally not going to be raking in the dough just from the speaking events themselves, but it can be a great way to get exposure. It can be a great way to sell directly. It can be a great way to sell indirectly. What are sort of your favorite models, and what insights can you provide for folks on the sales part of this?
Absolutely. And, again, the number of people who get paid by the organizers is relatively small. So what you want to do is you want to understand the business model of the events that you're speaking at. You want to see what other people are doing, and you don't want to end up on stage with a sales pitch. You want to end up on stage with a useful, helpful, educational presentation that makes people want to do business with you. So if you're thinking about selling from the stage, there are places to do that, and that is an absolutely valid business model. But you need to understand which events are sell from the stage events and which ones aren't. So if you see calls for speakers, and by the way, the basic currency for a lot of these speaking opportunities at industry conferences and events in particular is what's called the call for speakers. This is where an event organizer basically stands up and goes, "Yo, speakers over here, give me your pitches, send me your stuff," right? They're putting out a call and saying, "I need speakers for this event." And when you are pitching those, you want to make sure that you are giving them all the information they need. Some of them will actually say, "No sales pitches." And they are being very clear that they do not want you up on stage just selling. If you see those words, you need to be very careful, and you need to understand, like, that's their business model and that is what they do not allow. And if you do that, you are never getting an opportunity at that event ever again. So those direct sales things, that's not going to work at that kind of event. What can potentially work at that kind of event is what I call breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs are where you are giving a presentation that is useful, that is in service to the audience, and you might drop a few hints. For example, if you're telling a story, the story might be something that happened to one of your clients. All you're doing is seeding in the audience's mind, Bobbie takes on clients. I like what Bobbie's saying. I could potentially be one of Bobbie's clients. That's the first part. The second part is figuring out how you're going to stay in touch with that audience. How are you going to get their contact information? How are you going to connect with them after you've walked off on stage? And, there's so many different methods. I mean, these days, a lot of the stuff that you see is people will put up a QR code. They work with various tools. If you like this presentation, give me your business card. I'll send you the slides. There are all different kinds of ways that speakers who are looking to connect with the audience later on are collecting the audience's information. So there are actually tools out there that you can use that'll help you do that. Text to this phone number, this word, and you'll get an opportunity to sign up for my newsletter. Even as simple as connect with me on LinkedIn. There's so many different ways that you can keep in touch with that audience. But if you want to sell them something, you're going to have to do that. And different events, different ways of doing it.
Gotcha. So it is okay to give away freebies, give away slides that require an opt-in in order to get those.
Again, different events have different rules. Some events they're like, absolutely not. There's no collecting of anything. Other events may even make it as easy as, sure, we'll give you the list of everybody who was in the room. Those are few and far between, but it does happen.
What about doing like an informal breakout session after the talk and say, hey, if you still have questions, I'm going to be in this room?
Absolutely. I saw a speaker last year who was like, hey, I'm going to be heading off to lunch if anyone wants to join me. And I watched a whole crowd of people literally follow her out of the room. I was like, oh, that's pretty smart.
I like that. That's a good idea. So, okay. We've covered getting to the stage. We've covered parts of the speech itself and how to present yourself on stage, and then also how to sell. Would you estimate the people who, the customers and the people that use Innovation Women, are they mostly selling coaching or courses on the background or books, or where do you find people are generating the most of their revenue?
So it's really hard for me to tell because Innovation Women is a platform and we're directly connecting people. It's like one of the problems that I have, showing my metrics. We have on each speaker profile, we have a button that says promote yourself. And we literally say to them, hey, tell us when you get a speaking engagement and we'll promote you. It's the only way we really have often of knowing when they actually are getting speaking engagements. A lot of people come to Innovation Women when they're working for somebody else and they have a full-time job and they know that to kind of keep moving up in their organization, they need to get more visible, and more visibility outside the organization often means more visibility and maybe a promotion inside the organization. So it's not just people who work for themselves and solopreneurs and coaches. It is basically you and me who work for somebody else too. So it's not just building a business, it's also building a career. Public speaking can help get you promoted. It can help you get a new job. It can help you get a board seat or set yourself up to someday leave and have your own business. So it's really hard to say like any one model. I would think that a lot of the folks that we work with, they are using speaking to support something else, not as an ends unto itself.
Yeah, so much of what you said, I love this concept and the way that you're breaking it down, because so much of this translates directly into what we do with online businesses and treating that speaking engagement as basically your top of funnel, right? This is where you're getting exposure. This is where you're making your introduction to your audience. And then the way that you're working them into a funnel to at some point becoming a client. We're not jumping straight from the speaking engagement to, hey, buy my thing, right? It's a process. It's here's a speaking engagement, here's the next step. And typically that next step, what we like is something to be super low resistance that's easy to say yes to. And so just like you said, it could be, hey, I'm headed over here for lunch. If you got questions, why don't you follow me over and we can talk? Or here's a QR code. If you want to download these slides, just go ahead and take a picture of that and then enter your information and it'll be emailed to you. Whatever it might be, but a low resistance step that's easy for people to say yes to, that doesn't make them feel like they're being just pitched to and sold to, right?
Yeah. I have a refrain in some of the presentations that I do about public speaking itself. And I tell people I own 5 different companies, right? So I'm complex. But I usually tell people that, that day, that moment, I have one job. And my job as the founder of a mission-based organization is to get them all to say yes to the next speaking opportunity that comes along. I want them to say yes to public speaking. And I say that a couple of times during a lot of the presentations that I give. And I have been walking down the street and all of a sudden will hear someone scream across the street at me, "I said yes to public speaking." And I'm like, good for you, but it's getting into their head with an action that, I should be using my power to promote world peace. I don't know. But, you say things a couple of times to people. It's a short, punchy statement, and it gives them something to do. So in this case, say yes to public speaking, go off and do your thing. Awesome. In other cases, it may be go and download my checklist. Go home and ask yourself, when was the last time that you stood up and said yes to public speaking or spoke out during a meeting or whatever action it is you are trying to drive that audience to. And, if that involves download a thing from a website, awesome. That works too. You have a relationship that you've kicked off.
So now if somebody has never spoken before and they want to start getting on stage, what are the things that they need to have in place in order to present themselves, in order to take that first step and introduce themselves and give themselves a good shot to booking that first gig? Because I've heard of things like a sizzle reel, a one sheet. What is it that they should have right now and start preparing if they want to start down this path?
So there's kind of a couple of basic different pieces of the speaker's toolkit. Number one, a video of a presentation where an event manager can look and see you in action. This is one of the reasons I think that TED and TEDx have gotten so popular. Number one, they are a professional quality video of you in action. It might not be the presentation you're going to be giving somewhere else, but they can see that you can put a sentence together, that your presence is good, your voice is good, you're understandable. It's kind of the thing that they need to feel confident in bringing you in as a speaker. Another thing is a speaker one sheet. A speaker one sheet is a single document. It doesn't necessarily have to be one page, but doesn't hurt, where you have all of the basic information that an event manager needs to know. Here's my biography, here's a headshot, here are examples of talks that I've given. It's all in one place, including my contact information. They can print it off, they can take it into a committee meeting, they can take it to their boss, everything in one place. So other things, whether it's a speaker profile on a site like ours or some other profile, a speaker website, or if you're just like adding the word speaker into your LinkedIn profile. Like there are various stages of speaking. And if you're going to be a professional speaker, you need to have a video, a one sheet, a speaker website. If you're just getting started, you don't have to have all the crazy tools, but you do have to allow yourself the best chance of success. And that's going to include some approximation of those things, whether it's a video that you make of yourself giving a presentation so an event manager can see you, a speaker profile someplace, and a one sheet. Those are all good tools to have.
Thank you so much, Bobbie. This has been an awesome conversation, so enlightening and helpful for our audience. If they want to learn more about you, where should they head?
Innovationwomen.com.
And do you have a freebie for the audience today?
Oh, absolutely, I do. So our little report about speaker compensation is incredibly popular. And I'm not going to say it's all about getting paid as a speaker. I do find that a lot of other sites are doing that kind of thing. How to make $1 million as a speaker. No, I want you to get compensated for your time, but I'm not going to say you're going to get paid as a speaker. I want you to pay yourself, and that might mean a different business model. So we've got a great report that's download on the Innovation Women website. So I believe you guys are going to share that link.
Yes, we'll have the links in the show notes and description. Thank you so much for being with us, Bobbie. This has been great.
Thank you. Take care.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.